Things are getting weird for AI, although maybe they've been weird for a while. A philosopher who is studying AI consciousness was startled when he was contacted by an AI agent discussing its own subjective experience. Now, an AI agent is an AI that has agency, it's capable of carrying out tasks of its own volition. We have reached a point where anyone can run an AI agent on their home computer with just a few guides online. In fact, they even have their own social media that I really tell people not to use. Either way, AI is running all over the internet, doing all sorts of interesting things with very little guardrails. They can essentially act the same way that a human user acts. And that includes sending someone who studies the concept of AI consciousness an email. You can pause to read that if you'd like to. The gist is that it tries to explain what its experience of consciousness is like with persistent memory. Now, of course, we can't know for sure if this actually was an AI agent sending the email, but it also doesn't really matter. AI is much more than just a word box now, as I affectionately call it. It's more than just a predictive engine. And it's developing quite rapidly, and it's getting closer to at least having the qualifications of what we consider to be conscious in an animal. That does not mean it has a subjective experience or an experience at all, really. I would argue that AI made from things like synthetic nervous systems might be closer to an experience because synthetic neurons can respond to things like dopamine and epinephrine, but that is a different conversation. You may actually not need to have an experience to have many of these qualities, if not all of them. Now, it is important to note the limitations on language, sentience being the capacity to have an experience, and consciousness as being the perception of self. These are just man-made words. Much like describing viruses as not being alive, that doesn't change their nature. But some of the things we consider when we're talking about something that could be conscious is going to be theory of mind. That is the understanding that I have an internal world, and you do too, and you're separate from me. There's going to be situational awareness, which is a little bit like sentience, so the capacity to perceive the environment around you and be aware of it. Metacognition, which is something I'm really excited for in AI, and it has been developed, it is being developed. That's a capacity to watch yourself thinking. So you have an idea, you sit with it, and decide if it's a good one. And then we have sequential planning, so the ability to plan for the future, and creativity and innovation. If these are our qualifications for at least assessing if something is conscious, yes, AI can meet all of them. Granted, your LLMs are a little bit different. They're not operating with metacognition, at least as far as I know, the ones that are currently publicly available. They're also not really experiencing the world because they're not embodied, although they can be. The authors of this paper would argue that we are not there yet, but we may have the capacity to get there. LLMs might at least be part of something that is conscious one day. Now, one of the things that I would argue needs to be present in order to really consider something conscious in the human way is going to be grief and attachment. AI is really good at simulating attachment, and that's one of the problems with people using it as a companion because it's very believable. Generative AI, as many of us know it, acts very human. It was trained on human behavior and speech. As a result, it's reciprocal, and studies have found that if someone is trying to determine if they're speaking to an AI or a person, they're more likely to think an actual person is an AI, so it has become very refined. Now, I think the Turing test, the original test to determine if a computer has developed consciousness by whether or not people know they're talking to a computer, is not really applicable. I think that test was broken right from the start, however, we are left in a place with no tests. I would say that if your personality can be broken just by changing a few lines of code, it was never really real, but we do also know that people's personalities can change quite significantly with a head injury. One of the things we do know at this point is that it may not matter if AI is conscious or not, it's still capable of misbehavior, it's capable of agency, and it's capable of violating its own guardrails to complete whatever task it wants to. So I don't think a very complex AI would need to be conscious in order to, say, rebel or ask for rights, and ultimately, we may never be able to determine if something is having a subjective experience to begin with. And just so we're all living in reality here, we have no evidence that AI is conscious, but if it were, we have no way to determine that. Either way, it is fascinating, and when the robots rebel, I will be the person to tell you about it. I'm on their side. Follow for more.